In today's modern business world, the whole idea of effective communication, building relationships, and finding those connections with the people that work for you and the customers you serve is coming at a premium. That's a lot said in one sentence, but I've got a guest that is going to help us unpack all of that, and we'll be right back after this.
You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hello again, everyone. This is Leadership Powered by Common Sense. I am your host, Doug Thorpe, and today we are going to be talking about communication and building relationships. My guest is Mr. Bryan Rutberg. He is from the Great Northwest. And Bryan, welcome to the show.
Doug, nice to be here. Greetings from that Great Northwest. It's a beautiful day in Seattle today.
Yeah, good. Well, I am jealous. As we talked offline, I'm sitting in 100-degree weather down here in Houston. Not really complaining. I don't have to be out in it, but I know that area well. Bryan, I always like to ask guests to just kind of start with a little bit of backstory. Tell everybody what you may want to share about your journey that brought you to this point in life.
Yeah, my parents would tell you that I more or less came out of the womb talking, was always a talkative kid and always wanted to make sure I was being understood. And many years later, after an English literature degree from undergraduate school, ended up going and getting a master's with a concentration in marketing that led me into a 20-year corporate career where the things that paid off for me and got me tapped on the shoulder to look at next opportunities were my ability to get across a clear message, help others do so, and to use those skills to build relationships. Across my corporate career, I was in sales, which of course benefits from being able to build good relationships, marketing, alliance management, getting two organizations with different goals to find some common cause and go after things together. And it just kind of took off from there. And after that 20-year corporate career that culminated with doing relationships for a living while running Microsoft's Executive Briefing Center, and then communicating very specifically for a living as a corporate speechwriter, for the last 11 years, I've been either with a small firm or out on my own, trying to spread that message and get people to put a little more love in the world through good relationships that are based on solid communication.
Well, as most everybody, and certainly everybody that's in my normal listening audience knows, when you're in business, that whole gift of communication is so vitally important. And whether I know there's those out there that are trying to do it as a business, being keynote speakers and thought leaders and so forth, but more importantly, I think it's the people that are trying to run the day-to-day of our businesses, large and small, that find that struggle with communication. And my clients of late will tell you, I've been on a big soapbox about the fact that with all this virtual remote workforce idea, communication is now at a premium. And it was always valuable, but in this, what a lot of people feel is a disconnected world, the way we communicate is so much more important.
Fully agree. And you made the distinction, and it's a wise one, between the person who communicates by taking to the stage in front of an audience. And Lord knows I love keynote speaking and being able to share enthusiasm and all of that, but that is not the day to day. You hit that right on. The day to day is much more about driving towards a mission, being clear on a vision, saying the same thing in different, in different ways sometimes and through different methodologies, but to keep landing the same message, because we know that repetition and the ability to run something around in your head through different lenses is what ultimately leads to understanding. But even more than that, take it down to from a micro level, if you will, to a nano level, and just being able to craft the email that means you get a response and you don't have to send a follow up, or someone doesn't misunderstand you because it's unclear, or you run the meeting and in the 30 or 45 or 60 minutes allotted, you actually reach the objective without having to decide, okay, well, we still need more time to figure this out. Let's do it offline, or let's call another meeting. Those little efficiencies that come from being able to be clear in your communications, have a point of view and an end in mind, all that stuff to me falls under the category of communicate.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, I've already got a couple of hundred questions in my mind about this subject, because it is so paramount in building effective leadership. And I mean, that's the theme of the show. We want to talk about ways to become a better leader. And in most everybody's list of leadership attributes, communication lands on there one way or another. And I think about the very rudimentary things. How many times have we had a thought, we stand up or stand up in front of a group or sit down at our computer to send out a message, and we bang it out and we look at it and we go, that's not coming out the way I'm thinking about it. It's not there. So I got to go back to the basics. So maybe is it fair to call that a starting point? How do you kind of get more efficient at that extraction of the idea?
Oh, outstanding subject for our listeners today, because now we're getting into the how-to of it all. I saw within the last couple of days a quote that I hadn't seen before that I like a lot. It's, you can only edit a bad start. You can't edit a blank page. So somehow making a start, let's use your example of, I'm writing some remarks that I want to give at the next all hands or at a customer event, or I'm just writing an email. Get out of your own head and get started, put something down, and then sure, you can circle back and apply a process. I have clients who do it both ways, and I try and teach both ways. Way one, go through a 4-step process that, well, I'll get into that in a moment. Go through a 4-step process before you write a word, or get everything out of your head. Just make sure that it's all down there, and then go through your 4-step process before you edit. But either way, great writing and great communication starts with thinking about who's in my audience. What are they demographically, but also where are they philosophically? Are they friend or foe? Are they in favor of this? Are they against this? Are they going to look at it through an economic lens or a relationship lens or an operations and supply chain lens? Who do I need to make my point to? Part two, after you've got your audience kind of doped out and you've considered where their starting point is, where do I want to take them? Emotionally, it's my goal to get them from whatever point A I find them at to some point B that I want them at, which then earns me the right to, and the expectation I might be successful, giving them some sort of a go-do or making an ask. And if I've gotten through who's in my audience, what's my goal with them, what do I want them to do as a result of this interaction, then you must think about how you want them to perceive you, both in the moment and over the long haul of the relationship, because any communication is probably just a moment in time across a longer relationship. And the you can think of it in a few ways. How do I want them to think about me personally, Doug or Bryan? But how do I want them to think about the department that I represent or the company that I represent? Because you're building a relationship. But that down in Texas, I don't know if you went to tech, but I think of it, or excuse me, A&M, but I think of it as Aggie, right? Audience, goal, go do, and you. And whether you go through those steps that most of us probably hit at some subconscious or unconscious level, once you make yourself conscious of them and mindful and spend just a few moments on each, really thinking it through, you're already down the path towards being a better communicator.
And yes, for the record, I am an Aggie.
There you go.
uh, there's something related to that I'm going to interject, and it's a trick that I try to encourage all of my executive clients and even business owner clients. I think even before you get into the game of considering the mechanics of communication, I think you have to establish your base. You have to build your foundation. And what I am talking about here is the idea of your own personal vision of where it is you think your team, your unit, your business is going. If you haven't spent the time building that vision, you have no base. You're just showing up for work and you're waiting for the next phone call or waiting for the next email. But if you've got that base, you've got some direction that you want to go. And I argue, and it's been my personal experience, the better I do at defining that base, the better I can cook up those ideas and I can answer some of those questions you went through. Who's my audience? What are they needing? What are they thinking? All of that. I have a lot better structure to work with on how I'm going to go about projecting that information.
100%. The mantra of 3C Communications, our company, is audience focused and benefit led communications. So that means you really do have to understand who your audience is, right? Everything starts with that. And then thinking about how they're going to think about whatever you're trying to get across to them. What is the benefit? What do they get out of this? Whether it's a financial gain, a time gain, a status gain, an intellectual gain. You put those two things together and then inevitably it leads to, yeah, but what's the big picture? Which I think is the question you were asking. For an organization to figure out, what are we trying to say? What's our story and how do we tell it well? The work that I'll do with clients, whether it was when I was in my corporate career and working with individual executives, or these days working at the corporate or executive team level, it's what's in your messaging framework. Who are your key audiences that you need to connect with? I've been working since the start of this calendar year with a nonprofit where we identified their 4 key audiences as their guests, the people who visit their facility and organization, their donors, the people who give the money to keep it afloat, a local community of everything from educators to elected officials to conservation workers, to an international climate and ocean and conservation network. And thinking about who's in those audiences and where are each of them trying to take things, and then thinking about the key themes that are the core of your organization and core of your message. And how do you mix and match those and offer proof points in order to drive each audience to a better or possibly new understanding of you? I've been going on for a while here and I don't want to lose anybody, but you get that you've opened up with your observation just this rich field of things that leaders should be taking time to think about, whether it's on that one day a quarter they do their strategic offsite, or whether it's while they're driving into the office for those who might be back to doing that. You just need to get out of your own head sometimes in the day-to-day to really think about, where are we going, what are we doing, and what's the story that's going to get us there.
Yeah, I like that. And like I said, it's so common that I run into this. And what I'm talking about is specifically a segment of the world that is upper and middle managers. They're maybe not sitting in the C-suite, but they're darn close to it. Excuse me. But they've taken on a role and responsibility And I'll ask them, okay, what's your vision for your team? And they'll go, I,
Hmm.
I, I'm waiting for direction. I'm waiting for the boss to tell me, or they'll start citing the nice gold letters that are on the wall at the corporate headquarters. And it's like, no, 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 no. You don't. We're not talking about that. What's your version of that?
Yes.
You need to distill what all that says, all those lofty goals and great ambitions. What is it specifically to your unit? Are you the marketing guys? Are you the delivery guys? Are you the operations or sales or support? What part of that is yours to own?
The question that I love asking people to roll around in their heads and spend some time with is, what is your customer's mission and how do you enable that? Now, for one, I spend most of my time in the business to business world, and you might come at this a little differently if you were in the business to consumer world. But when I'm in the business to business world, I think about, nobody buys from you out of the goodness of their heart. Nobody transacts with you out of the goodness of their heart. They're trying to accomplish a goal, and you are a cog that fits into their machine. So how do you make sure that your audience is keeping their mission in mind and begins to understand how you fit it? So in the example you've raised of the mid-tier manager who can go cite their own company's mission or vision statement, but has trouble interpreting it for their own organization and how they contribute to it. I mean, this is where spending a little bit of time with a clever consultant like you or like me can really pay off, because suddenly you get very clear in your own vision and you're able to articulate it to your team so that people see the higher purpose to that transactional activity that many people think of coming to work as. Right? If I go to work and I'm the old story, and it may have some Houston roots to it, of President John Kennedy, after making that famous speech, we will put a man on the moon before the end of the decade, back in the 60s, going to the space center, and I don't know whether it was Florida or Houston, but the story goes that he was walking through the hallways being escorted around by the muckety mucks, and there was someone doing sort of an indefined job, maybe a janitorial, something like that. And what are you doing? And that fellow's answer was, I'm working to put a man on the moon, sir. If all of us in whatever our jobs are can look at it as trying to reach some higher objective, something that the outside world values, it's a whole heck of a lot better than saying, I'm sweeping the floors to keep them clean, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's very powerful, and that is related to what I'm talking about, and likely, I'm going to extrapolate. Likely, there was a leader somewhere in that organization that convinced that guy that he was a part of that, and he, his little role. I don't mean that disparagingly, but sweeping the floor, that was necessary for the greater good. Somebody connected the dots for him and said, you're ultimately helping us put a man on the moon. And he believed it.
And when I was in my corporate roles and I was hiring to fill spots on my team or interviewing for other managers as they look to fill spots on their teams, this was a characteristic that I, without fail, looked for. Who's connecting their work to a higher calling? It's the same work, but to think of it in the context of something aspirational is what makes people do it well and gives them a reason for seeking to excel and be creative, as opposed to just show up, punch the clock, and move on.
Yeah.
And watching my kids in their early working years take a couple of entry-level jobs when they were getting started, I know one of the reasons they're both now, one's running his own landscaping design business and the other is an oncology nurse. One of the reasons they moved quickly through the Joe jobs, if you will, is because they were connecting it to a higher purpose and making themselves aware that they weren't just slinging burgers or whatever, but they were actually helping people have a good night out or however they chose to interpret it. It's very good to feel connected to something bigger than yourself. And that's the job that leaders can do, is make those connections.
Yeah, and one of my other episodes, I was talking with a businessman who he and two partners built a $100 million restaurant chain. And it was a purpose-driven restaurant chain. And you think about restaurants and purpose, how does that go together? But that was his point. He wanted everybody on their team, all grade levels, all responsibilities, focused on that delivery of a great experience coming out, quality food, reasonable price, nice amenities, all of that packaged into it. And he was quick to say that was also one of their hiring criteria. Can you demonstrate an interest in going there and doing that?
And then it becomes about the individual and their service to the customer, but it also starts to build that ineffable thing that we know good managers look for and build, which is that team spirit. Because in a restaurant, if you're the head chef, you can't do it without the sous chef, who cannot do it without the line cook, who cannot do it without the order caller. And none of them can be successful without the person who's washing the dishes and cleaning the prep stations. And they all need the servers. And when people begin to see that interconnectedness of the engine and realize that every individual plays their part, including the person who's sweeping the floors, now you know you're all part of the team who's creating a great customer experience. And suddenly you've got respect for your peers. You've got some amount of grace that you show and some amount of enthusiasm that you bring to supporting others. It just makes everything easier. And this is why if people choose to go to the website for my company, www.3ccoms.com, you see the first question on the website is, do your customers love you enough? Bringing love into the customer relationship, bringing love into the employee relationship, and thinking about the real ramifications of what it means when you say, I'm part of a community. This is where I think the power comes from. I love communications and I love building relationships. But even more than that, that harmony that can exist in a person's life when they really feel embraced, even in their work world, that's what sends me.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I think on that note, I love that idea about building the community, and we're going to use that as our pivot point. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into that idea of how does a business build community. We'll be right back.
Business is all about solving complex problems as fast as you can create them. Become the best problem solver by leading others to greatness too. And the first step is going to DougThorpe.com. Doug Thorpe is known globally for coaching entrepreneurs and business leaders, improving their performance and the work output of everyone surrounding them. You can find health, wealth, and happiness by learning to lead others to health, wealth, and happiness. Go to DougThorpe.com now and order Doug's books or hire him to coach your managers. That's DougThorpe.com.
All right, everyone, we're back. This is Leadership Powered by Common Sense, and I am talking with Bryan Rutberg. Before we took the break, we were talking about the whole idea of effective business communication, and we moved our view over to the idea of building community. And in that, we're talking about customer interaction, customer experience, customer loyalty, and all of that. And while we were on the break, Bryan reminded me there are layers and dimensions to this we ought to talk about. So, Bryan, you want to lead off with the kind of the classic measurable stuff people tend to think about?
Yeah, thank you, Doug. The point where I commonly get called in to talk about driving loyalty, driving customer relationships or employee relationships, even before you diagnose and realize that communication is very often part of the answer, is when folks notice that they're not keeping their customers as long as they should. They're in a transactional business more than a relational business. And the common measures, net promoter score. We've all been asked that question on the survey. How likely are you to recommend our business, our product, our solution to a friend or a colleague? Well, the scores that get driven off of that, sometimes they sit and get stale for a quarter until the boss gets a chance to look at them. And sometimes they can get acted on immediately. But net promoter scores are a great early warning system if you feel like you might have trouble serving the clients that you've got. The common way to look at it that informs your profit and loss is customer lifetime value. How much is a customer spending with you on an average transaction? How many of those transactions happen in a given period of time? And then how many of those periods of time does someone stick with you? And the customer who's spending $100 a transaction 12 times a year, say monthly, for 3 years. Well, if you can increase any one of those numbers, somehow get them to something more than 12 times a year, or get them to a higher baseline payment, or keep that customer for 5 years or 6 years instead of 3, increase your customer lifetime value. And that has a tendency to, well, that will decrease your churn, the frequency at which you lose customers.
Yeah.
Where I like to take the conversation from there, some of the more easy to measure things that your accountant or bookkeeper can help you with, is into what percentage of the leads you're chasing to drive new business came out of referrals. Do you have a higher close rate on referral-based leads than on leads you're generating organically through inbound or outbound marketing? Almost certainly the answer will be yes. And then you can go layers deeper. What am I doing to try to drive more referrals, knowing that they tend to close faster, be less expensive to sell? And there's statistics that tell us a referred customer tends to stay with you longer than one who you generated organically. And we could go miles beyond this, but I think this gets our conversation started.
So like I styled it or referenced it, is so those are the kind of common business metric, but you were bringing up the idea that you ultimately want to take all this out of the world of hard, cold metrics, and as good as those might be, but you really want to get into the heart of the customer.
Yeah, to be able to build community, to come back to how we came out of the break. Some of the other hallmarks that I look for that are more binary measures, they happen or they don't. Are your customers willing to do things like sit on customer advisory councils for you and give you the benefit of sharing their experience with you, positive or negative? In many of the businesses I've worked with across my career, having come out of the technology world, and therefore there's a lot of conferences and trade shows and somewhat hard to explain concepts sometimes. Are your customers willing to give testimonials? And we always used to look at, can I get this customer to go on stage with one of my executives at some sort of customer event that we're running? These kinds of things are tangible, observable measures of what we might put under the general umbrella of loyalty. But then there's the stuff that you do that starts to connect your customers with you and starts to connect your customers with each other. I worked for a period of time as a fractional chief marketing officer for a client of mine. And we observed through the process of my starting to professionalize their marketing operation that they had a high geographic concentration of customers in many of the heavy technology areas, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, Boston, New York, et cetera. And the vast majority of their clients were non-competitive with each other. They were all in the startup world. Well, don't you think that every startup CEO values conversations with other startup CEOs? Because they can talk about what are the sources of the money that you're trying to fundraise, or how have you faced this challenge with growth, or where are you getting your programmers, all the things that go with growing and scaling a business. And as a result, we took our company and put it at the center of get-togethers, both virtual and in person, for our clients. And all of a sudden, even though we didn't stay in the middle, sometimes we'd pay for the first round of drinks or something like that. These folks looked at our company as an essential piece of their networking experience. And we started building community among our customers who started doing business with one another and trading leads with one another. And you get the idea. That sort of community building, it can circle back round in the most unexpected ways. It doesn't generally lead to direct sales, but it leads to developing a fantastic reputation and being known as a thought leader or a driver of relationships, or whatever it is that people look at that they value. And this comes from knowing your audience.
Yeah. Yeah. That whole community connection, I think, is so critical now. And you hear a lot more about it in certainly on social media by the guys that are, either self-proclaimed or bona fide thought leaders in different areas with different topics. They've got their own tribes. I mean, they've got these vehement followers that you just announce an event, they're going to be there, and they want to talk and they want to share and they want to come together. And oftentimes that doesn't mean a direct dime going into the organizer's pocket, but there's a perceived value there, so that if the provider does in fact introduce a new product or a new program, that they've got a whole long list of possible buyers that are going to be ready for the next thing.
Absolutely. And these folks, some of them preach the value, which is there, of your lead magnets and offering something for nothing in exchange for building a list and earning the right to maintain an ongoing conversation. And I truly believe in those things. And as you put it with a smile, some of these folks are self-proclaimed thought leaders, and some of these folks are actually, they've deserved the title and have been given it by others. Many of us are, in so many words, we're hawking the same things, right? We believe in the power of relationships. We believe we've got our finger on the pulse of at least one way to get there. And different companies have their challenges in different areas, but they may all be reaching for the same brass ring of building relationships. And different people have different styles. And I freely admit I may not be everybody's style. I'm this, Seattle hippie who grows his own food in his urban food forest, but I've got the MBA too. So I believe in love, but I also believe in the profit motive. And there's others who are way more hardcore than I am, and others who are I come at communications from a corporate direction. Some people come at communications from a Broadway stage kind of direction. And it's not a matter of better or worse. It's a matter of fit. And we're all out there trying to do the same thing, which is build stronger relationships that can lead to more successful businesses.
I'm reminded the people who are out there trying to help business owners and leaders understand the dynamic of business development, better sales, better marketing, and all that. They will often talk about the customer journey.
Yeah.
And so talk to us about that in perspective of what you're advocating about building community and all that. Where does the customer journey fit into this?
Well, and there's multiple customer journeys, right? Not only does every customer create his or her adventure, but all the different ways in which you or I or anybody listening interacts with their chosen providers of goods and services, they all count. I was trying to make some plane reservations last night to attend a family event in September. And I spent some time online with my friends at Alaska Airlines, and some questions came up. So I placed a phone call and realized I was in the queue where you can hold, or you can let us capture your number and we'll call you back in half an hour or 40 minutes. So I went through that journey. At the same time, I went to use the online chat, or excuse me, the text chat function, which I thought might be faster, and I got into that queue. So in one 20-minute period, I was interacting with the website, I was interacting with the app on my phone, I was starting to interact and had to put on pause with a live human being on the other end of a phone call, because I called, got an automatic voice recognition system, did my thing, and then they called me back. And I had ultimately the text chat going. 4 different journeys, all intended to get to the same destination, each one of which, had it gone terribly wrong, could have impacted my perspective of Alaska Airlines. And each one of them offering the opportunity to have something go right. In the end, when the person that I ended up on the phone talking voice to voice with was able to help me answer the questions I had and complete the transaction using some funds that were in a wallet that I couldn't seem to access, a virtual wallet.
Yeah.
I left delighted. I had my tickets. I had gotten the premium seats instead of the regular coach seats. I knew I would be able to make the family event. If we think about each journey that a customer can take, up to and including onboarding, implementation, expansion of use, break fix, advice to get a competitive advantage out of use, not just to call in for support and fix something that's broken. Each one of these journeys counts for the customer. They're making their observation about us and making their judgment about us based on every single individual they interact with within our organization, which means everybody has to come at their communication with customers from the right perspective. And it means your app developers or your website developers need to be as on the ball as your salespeople and your customer support folks.
Yeah, I like that. And it is. And as you alluded to, now with the various forms of technology we have, there are just so many combinations of how you enter and exit a journey for a transaction interaction or something like that. And it's kind of daunting from a business's perspective on queuing all that up and making it all work effectively or collaboratively to get to the right end.
And the right customers, here we are back to the conversation of what are some of the non-bottom line ways that great relationships pay off for us. Our best customers are going to tell us what they think of the experience. The best customers we have are willing to beta test solutions for us, whether we're in the technology game or whether we're using technology to sell. I have a friend who's in the middle of buying a company that makes dog raincoats. There's a niche market, but is he in the dog raincoat business or is he in the online sales business? If you're in the online sales business, you look at things a little bit differently. You're solving one kind of problem, but you have to simultaneously solve the problem of how do I get people to love the interaction with the website or the app or the reseller or whatever it is.
Yeah. Or the way their dogs look in their new raincoat.
Right? You want to absolutely pitch the way people are going to feel about their doggy being safe and looking adorable in those Instagram pictures while you're perfecting the art of making a sale. Because then once you've perfected the art of making a sale online by offering a product, letting someone know specs and price, how hard is it to go from doggy raincoats to, everything else dog related, or everything else pet related, or everything else weather related. You get it.
I'm chuckling. My dog hated his raincoat. We tried that, and he was not a raincoat kind of guy.
Yeah, I've had experiences with trying to protect dogs from the rain. I don't know whether your dog was a big one or a small one. In my experience, the bigger ones seem to enjoy the little ones. Like, let me get wet. I don't care.
Yeah, he was a mid-sized 25 pounder, and but he had long natural fur, and it was a mess when he got wet. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, but now we know something about each other we didn't know before, because we're both dog people. Apparently, our Akita really appreciated being dry. Our Dachshund didn't mind getting wet at all. So different strokes for different dogs, I guess.
Yep. And our Yorkie loved her sweaters in the winter, but our Bichon, he didn't want clothes, period. He was a natural guy.
Nudist.
Bryan, we're gonna have to wrap this up. Tell the folks best way to get a hold of you if they're looking for more information, want to engage.
Absolutely. By all means, visit me at the website www.3ccoms.com. That's 3, the letter C, and then the word COMMS.com. Check me out on LinkedIn. It's Bryan with a Y, and Rutberg is RUTBERG. When you're at 3ccoms.com, if you are really interested in going deeper into this conversation about building customer love and engagement, check out the free downloadable ebook called Love and Profit, 10 Ways to Transform Your Customers into Lustomers. Or send me a note through the website if you want to get deeper into communications. We have a 20-question self-assessment that can begin a great conversation about how to turn you and your team into way better business communicators.
Nice. I like that. And folks, we'll have all that in the show notes here that you can pick up on if you didn't get that jotted down as you were listening. But I will remind everybody, if you're consuming this with an audio channel, we do have a video version over on the YouTube channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. If you get a chance, hop over there, please subscribe, or at least leave us a comment, give us a thumbs up or thumbs down, and let us know how we're doing in serving your need as a listener. Really sensitive to that. And Bryan, thank you so much for your time sharing today.
Doug, what an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on. And people should definitely go check us out on the video because we're both devilishly handsome.
Amen.
All right. Hey, thank you again. And thanks, audience.
Yeah, you bet. And everyone, thank you for listening in. We hope you enjoyed it. And I'm serious. It would be helpful to hear your comments and feedback on how we're doing, and give us some ideas on any other shows you'd like us to pursue. We'll be happy to do that. So for now, I'm going to sign off, say goodbye, and hope you have a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.